How language is lost. The Abipon had a word for everything, even the invisible amphitrachus spirits that swam the Argentine Gran Chaco. Wrestling, riding, raiding the Spanish for horses, tributes to unseen gods, rabbit-like, prone to disappearing. Gave way to farming, kneeling in naves. Their own shamans couldn't shapeshift anymore, forgot the prophesied destruction, a vast yellow snake swallowing rivers, trees whole, and crouched silently in the dust as a clerk counted them like animals, like cattle. Sent his report back to court, 5,000 in 1750. When King Carlos expelled the Jesuits in 1768, half the Abipon had died of smallpox. The cleavage between this life and the old was complete. 50 years later, when a shriveled woman with spiraled palm leaves in her pierced ears and blue tattoos around her elbows lies on a straw mat in a hut corner in Resistencia, the younger woman, no relation, cooking over a smoky fire and soothing a baby to sleep, does not understand her dying words, her articulation of the world to come, the world lost. I thought it fitting to open tonight with the title poem from the chapbook. I'm extremely grateful that Emrys exists and saw fit to publish How Language is Lost, and it's been just pure joy to work with Sue Lyle Inman and Nancy D. Taylor as editors on this project. As most of you probably know, they're wonderful. I chose How Language is Lost as the title for the collection because the theme of loss and my fascination with language appear both severally and sometimes together in poems throughout the collection, and I think you'll see that fascination with language in this next poem. Consider the chickens and other lessons on sex and sin. There are more names for women than for men: mother, daughter, whore, cunt, bitch, witch, wife, hag. Names for sin are what they are or have been. Should we keep score? Is this some game to win, you ask? What about father, cuckold, fag? Are there more names for women than for men? If man's rooster and woman's humble hen, does it make a thin lick of sense to wag tongues on sin or what they are or have been? If Darwin has us in a muddy pen, are not morals and judgments useless tags? Who cares if there are more names for women? But still, it's the singular cock to 10 pullets, all flashy comb, stiff strut, and zag. What he does, not what he is or has been. The fair or foul, anonymous, pretend to busy themselves, knowing language lags, spin still more names for women than for men, for the sins of what we are and have been. So you might have noticed that one is a villanelle, and Nancy alluded to in her introduction, form, and I am attracted to formal poetry, at least in part because of the blossoming or sort of creativity that I think can come out of constraint, like the constraint of form. Miller Williams and John Ciardi talk about games as things that are made hard for the fun of it, and they put poetry in that class of games that are things made hard for the fun of it, and I like that description of poetry. And this next poem is also in a form, it's an invented form called the Decrescendo. Janice Fuller, who's an excellent poet and teacher up in Salisbury, North Carolina, invented the form, and it's got diminishing line lengths. So the first line is 10 syllables, the second line is 9 syllables, and on down to the 10th and last line, which is a single syllable. And then the other constraint is that the first syllable of each line must rhyme. So I used sort of a long title to get me into the poem. It's called At Jade Palace Garden on Our Second Date, You. And then the first word of the poem is fed, so that's the rhyme word. At Jade Palace Garden on our second date, you fed me black bean fish with cherry chopsticks, medical precision in your grip, pedestrian but lovely still, dead wood made useful again, bread to life in your hands, sediment in cups, red fortune scraps led, though not said, to bed. And this next poem is written in elegiac couplets, which are, the lines are basically dactylic hexameter, although with some substitutions, and the iamb comes very easily to me, I think, as for many speakers of English. So writing in dactyls where you have the stress and unstressed was very challenging, but I think ultimately rewarding for me. Elegy for a scarf borrowed from a mother now dead and left on a trolley car in Budapest at Christmas time. Back in the afternoon's cold wind, I realized my mistake then. It was too late to do much. Watch the old trolley car go. Is it regret for shadows lost? We weep for our little lost things, guiltily, selfishly mourn, no faith in sure recompense. Think of the story of Lot's wife, changed to a pillar of salt, punished for her rushed remorse. How much less I lost than she. Statue of snow-white salt, stock still, frozen in the heat of the desert. Lonely me, cold to the core, standing in snow blown like sand, watching in darkening streets the trolley car disappear, clanging with my unsettled heart, systole, diastole. Syntax on syntax passes house by narrow margin. The American Clean Usage Act seeks to improve spoken and written English by putting a price on misusage, and if the bill is signed into law, then the cost of run-ons will rise from mere breathlessness to over $13 a carton, and you'll be left with the alternatives of paying up or quitting. If the data shows, then you've got to pay, though there is a provision under consideration that moves to treat data like sheep, singular and plural, making untaxable under the Act the happy couple were, the staff stands stunned, and such. Spicing of commas carries a hefty premium. The improper use of the subjunctive alone is estimated to raise millions for the government. But others call them pie-in-the-sky projections, arguing it'll cost more money to employ and train a National Grammar Corps qualified to enforce the law than can be raised through the tax. Will the Senate pass the current bill? Proponents pray so. Detractors say no, asserting self-interest will prevail. As one staffer put it, if I was to bet, speeches will get a lot shorter if this thing passes. These senators don't make enough to pay for their bad habits. There are rumors a clutch of senators are cooking up a counter bill that aims to focus on poetry specifically rather than language at large. The primary argument being, we already have meter maids. At the very end of March, I went to hear Thomas Lux read at North Carolina State University in Raleigh, and he talked a little bit about humor in poetry, or humor in his poetry anyway, and he said that he likes, to make readers laugh, but then also likes to sort of pull them up short in the same poem so that the humor isn't too simplistic or too shallow. Those are my words, not his. He was a little more eloquent in how he described it, but in preparation for going to hear him, I decided to memorize one of his poems because I like to memorize. So I'd like to recite one of his for you now. Tarantulas on the Life Buoy by Thomas Lux. For some semi-tropical reason, when the rains fall, relentlessly they fall into swimming pools, these otherwise bright and scary arachnids. They can swim a little, but not for long, and they can't climb the ladder out. They usually drown, but if you want their favor, if you believe there is justice, a reward for not loving the death of ugly and even dangerous, the eel, hog snake, rats, creatures, if you believe these things, then you would leave a life buoy or two in your swimming pool at night. And in the morning you would haul ashore the huddled, hairy survivors and escort them back to the bush and know be assured that at least these saved as individuals would not turn up again someday in your hat, drawer, or the tangled underworld of your socks. And that even when your belief in justice merges with your belief in dreams, they may tell the others in a sign language 4 times as subtle and complicated as man's that you are good, that you love them, that you would save them again.